Yo, what up, Street Dogs there, Kim? All right, so the thought. This is on the philosophy of masculinity. So it's kind of weird. It's like our society is becoming a little bit like strange where men are not allowed to be men and masculine. So let me just kind of explicate my thoughts. So certainly, I studied sociology in school. My major was probably like 80-90% women. I took my gender studies courses at UCLA and stuff like that. Very heavy liberal left-leaning major. Grew up with a single mom, have a younger sister who I did wrestling moves to as a kid. And so that's just kind of where I'm coming from. So now, the funny thing is, like, a little bit about my personal history. When I was a kid, I was a fat kid, got teased a lot, and then I'm like, okay, I'm gonna start working out and get buff and whatever. So I started running with rocks in my backpack. My friend Spencer and Dicha, when I was in Bayside, Queens, they tell the stories very fondly, which is hilarious. Asked my mom to buy some dumbbells, started lifting weights, probably from the age 12 on to now. And so, like, for me, my goal was always to become like apex male, right? Like apex masculinity. I wanted to become the strongest out of all my friends, and I wanted to become unfuckable with it. Which essentially means like I don't want nobody to bully me anymore. And and I think, was kind of a good thing. But anyways, so the reason I bring this up is like the modern day discourse, it kind of like, for some reason, to be masculine is bad, and I'm just like, what? What y'all talking about, right? You hear all these buzzwords being tossed around and stuff like that, but these are just like my basic thoughts. So first and foremost, what does it be to be a man? I'm totally for, all sort of sex, gender stuff. You could be whatever you want to be. For me, as a heterosexual male, these are just some of my thoughts. So it don't really matter what you are or who you are or where you're from or whatever. Typically, actually, with men and women, the more test you have, the better. Testosterone, right? They also call it T in the community, right? So I know this girl, her name's Jenny. She has massive T, like half Caucasian, half Chinese. She could deadlift over like 360 pounds. She's probably like 5'4", maybe 125, 130 pounds or something like that. But anyways, tough person, okay? So for me, I want to get as buff and swole as I can. So, I lift weights. I've actually been experimenting doing more like kind of like Olympic lifting in my home apartment gym. And now I'm on the way to the park, maybe do some stuff on the rings. But the weird thing is, like, simple things like, you're not allowed to take off your shirt, you're not allowed to flex, and all this stuff like that. And like meeting up people who are like, higher social class, like these, tech nerds who run the world, or the academia, elite, whatever. It seems like everyone, nobody actually really likes their body. I personally love my body. I glorify it, and I work really hard on it, and I treat it kind of like my art project. But then the weird thing is, there's this bias that you're not allowed to get strong, you're not allowed to get buff, you're not allowed to assert yourself, you're not allowed to be masculine. And so first and foremost, let's define masculinity, right? If you got dick and balls, you're a man. So certainly you have the power to choose your gender, and I tend to think that, if you're born gay or, bisexual, whatever, I mean, totally happens all the time, right? I mean, I think more of a biological thing. So like, I tend to do think that, like, I mean, certainly environmental too, right? But like most people, I think you're either born gay or straight, or you're born bisexual, whatever. Who knows, right? But it's kind of funny because, you know, let's say you're a gay man, you can still be masculine, right? Like we look at the bears, they do that all the time. And there is this bias that, you know, if you think about the history of philosophy and history in general, you know, male are the apex sex, and then women is the weak sex. Now, a little bit of so that's kind of like more of the Greek, Roman, Western, European thought. Now, it's interesting with studying Eastern philosophies like Taoism and stuff like that is there's kind of there's more of a yin yang, right? It's like male and female. You kind of need both to create this epic thing, right? So certainly, okay, no matter how much we deal with all these kind of like modern day discourse, if you want to birth a child, for the most part, you need male sperm, female egg, and then boom, baby, right? And back in the day, birth was seen as like a lot more kind of holy and sacred than it is now, where, you know, I think, you know, I kind of grew up Catholic too, and the bias in the Catholic Church and Christianity in general is, you know, when you were birthed, that was your original sin. This notion of original sin is actually very, very bad because it makes you think that sex is kind of like this dirty, despicable, kind of bad thing. And, you know, even, you know, like you think about theology, right? Like immaculate conception, which means if Mary got immaculately concepted, that means everyone who's not Mary got dirtily concepted. And so for the Catholic Church, like sex is something kind of abhorrent. And even if you look at the priests, right, you have to, you know, none of them are allowed to have sex. And so anything sexuality wise is considered evil, the devil, whatever, right? But I want to add more open-mindedness and freeness when it comes to, like, you know, sexuality and, you know, stuff like that. So when it comes back to masculinity, I mean I can't speak to you because I think all aesthetics is subjective. It's individual to you, right? So for me, you know, I love dudes who are super duper buff. Like, it's hilarious too because, you know, if I was at the gym, right, and you see a dude who's like super duper swole or whatever, super jacked, I'm probably more interested in him than the girl who's like super duper sexy, right? And and you know, even if you think about ancient Athens, right, you know, they all had like their, you know, homoerotic boy toys on the side. So typically when people are anti-homosexuality and they talk about, like, you know, white supremacy, right? It's like, yo, what is white supremacy? It's like, if you're talking about white supremacy, you're thinking about ancient Athens, ancient Greece, the Romans. They were not white. They're kind of like Mediterranean, olive oil skin color. A lot of, you know, if you had a Greek person, I mean, we all know what Greek people look like, right? Like, all the great philosophers of the past, they just look like Greek people, right? So if you ever been to a Greek taverna or had falafel, all the peoples kind of look like that. But anyways, so when it comes to masculinity, for a long time actually in philosophy, the male sex was actually seen as the more beautiful sex, according to like Aristotle and stuff like that. And even in French times, right? Like for a long time in France, men put so much effort to make themselves beautiful. Now, once again, beauty is an aesthetic, subjective thing that people can't really say this is beautiful, that's not beautiful. But I think I'm one of the first people to have thought, I mean, after Nietzsche, that there is certainly a biological, physiological aspect to beauty in the human body, especially the male gender, right? Or the male sex. So sex is what you're born with, gender is what you choose after the fact. So let me continue in this next video. All right, part 2. All right, so continuing my thoughts. So now it's tricky because, I mean, certainly women have been much more oppressed in society far longer than men. Ooh, look at that. So beautiful. Anyways, so, you know, certainly we all know women's been oppressed forever, and certainly in America. So like the gender movement and women's rights and feminism, I think it's a good thing. Now the problem though is to think about, like, I like the word congruent. You know, if you think about geometry, to be congruent means that there is some sort of social symmetry, which I actually think is really important. So, for example, if you're a woman or whoever, and you mention toxic masculinity, similarly, as a society, we should be tolerant to saying toxic femininity. Now, I don't believe in toxic femininity. I think that's kind of a stupid idea. But generally, my gist is I just, like, I don't fuck with nobody else. Like, yo, you could do whatever the fuck you want. That's a good thing. But I don't like it when other people fuck with me. So when people try to censor me or say, don't say that or do that, and, you know, put on your shirt again, I'm like, yo, like, you could do you, I could do me, and I don't want you to try to superimpose your personal views upon me. And even everything I see in these videos and blog posts, whatever, it's all just my subjective reality, and they're all just kind of tips and ideas and thoughts that I want to expose you to. But please, please, please don't do as I do. And you know, generally I don't think that there's any sort of ultimate truth. And for me, I just kind of do this for fun. To me, philosophy is the ultimate Game Boy thing, where I just like to think through thoughts. It's all about the turbo thoughts, which kind of get you going and make life a lot more interesting. But anyways, so when it comes to masculinity, basic thoughts from physiology, right? Like men and women, right? The more muscle mass you have, the better. The lower your body fat percentage, the better. Now, I've done some studies on this, and it looks like the ideal balance is for men, around 10% body fat is pretty good. If you get into the single digits and you get like uber shredded, your testosterone production actually goes down and you can't really procreate, you become less fertile. So that's not a good thing, because, you know, certainly your body needs some fat in order to metabolize, to have babies and stuff like that. Same thing with women. I think women, around 20% is optimal. If it's too low for women, same thing, right? They're not fertile, they can't give birth and stuff like that. So, and then there are, once again, physiological differences. If you look at skeletal anatomy of men versus women, just look at the hips. Hips don't lie. My hips don't lie. So what that means is we must accept there are physiological, you know, differences between men and women. And also, I was doing some research on testosterone. Just go on Wikipedia and just search testosterone. Then, you know, link to the PubMed article or whatever. It's typically at any given time, men on average have 7 to 8 times more testosterone than women. And actually, in terms of like daily metabolizing the testosterone, men are around almost like kind of like 20 times more. So if we just do the simple thing, like a lot of people don't like to think that, you know, they believe in 100% free will, and they don't like to think that your hormones affect you. But dude, come on, like whoever doesn't think hormones don't affect them is stupid. Like if I stuck an EpiPen into your thigh and then you get the adrenaline hormonal rush, certainly that's going to alter your behavior than if, you know, I give you, or if I injected a bunch of serotonin into you, or cortisol, or whatever it may be. So we are affected much more by our hormones than we like to think, and that's just life, and nothing wrong with it, right? And even for myself, if I'm super stressed out, I can't, you know, a lot of cortisol pumping through my body, I can't really think as well. But actually, this is where hormones are a good thing. After I get a good pump, lift some weights, do some muscle ups, work out at the park, stuff like that, it, you know, whatever hormones in my body, whether it be testosterone or, you know, serotonin or dopamine, whatever, it kind of gives me a boost, which gives me more elevated mood, gives me much more joy and stuff like that. Tom! Yo, how's it going? I haven't seen you in like 10 years. How you doing? What are you doing today? I'm walking and talking. Yeah. So how's it feel to be famous?
Good. No camera today.
No camera?
No.
Well, what's up?
I got in trouble.
You got in trouble?
Yeah.
Oh, why?
If I didn't have the shirt on, it would have been fine. Sure.
Oh, you had to keep on the shirt?
You don't want no repercussions.
Oh, okay. That's.
See, I soft, right?
Yeah. All right, part 3. Let's continue this thought on masculinity. So yeah, essentially, so this is where things kind of get tricky. Is that like, I think society is actually trying to make you less masculine insofar much as like masculinity is kind of seen as like a disease that somehow needs to be cured. I'm like, yo, this is kind of a little bit nonsensical. So for example, I love to eat meat, right? And I'm not saying everyone should eat meat, you know, you want to be a vegan, you know, or a vegetarian or pescatarian, whatever, like be my guest, because it's a free country, everyone's allowed and should be allowed to do as they please. However, you know, it only becomes problematic when people try to tyrannize over you and tell you, do this, do that, don't do this, don't do that. And so it's really essential that, you know, whatever you identify yourself as, you give yourself the ability to assert your masculinity. And now, taking this to capitalism and consumerism is really interesting. I'm like, why is it that you're allowed to buy a Porsche 911, take the top off, you know, be fucking loud and drive down the freeway or drive down the street, you know, flex off that, or you're allowed to walk around with the Rolex, but I'm like, but you're not allowed to walk off with your shirt off, or you're not allowed to flex your muscles. And so my theory is there's kind of this bias that, I don't know, maybe rich people or high class people or whatever, is that, you know, because you can't buy a good body, right? No matter how rich or poor you are, you can't just, you know, buy a good body. You need to work for it. And even for guys who take testosterone and human growth hormone, whatever, to my understanding, it only gives you like, and this is kind of based on why I watch an Icarus, it might only give you like a 10% boost. So it's substantial, but not like, it's not gonna, you know, you can't just take roids and you become like He-Hulk. You still gotta work hard. So in some ways, the body and the human fitness is kind of the ultimate equalizer. And at the end of the day, what I truly believe in is, I believe in equality. I believe in, you know, open access. I believe that everybody, irregardless of their background or their whatevers, should be allowed free reign to become the greatest version of themselves that they desire. So yeah, just moving forward in life, let's just think more about, you know, define masculinity for yourself. Don't let others superimpose it upon you. Masculinity is not a bad thing. Whenever people say the word, you know, toxic masculinity or something, just like take a pause and just, you know, this is my new thing, right? Like whenever people say things that I don't like, it just has a bad ring in my ears. I just kind of pause and I just like stop. And I say, what do you mean by that? Or what does that mean? And then just kind of give people a chance to explain their thoughts. And then at this point, I'm not even interested in proving people wrong. I'm just kind of curious, like why people think and feel that way. And then also realizing I don't want people to superimpose their ideas upon me. So if I can understand it, then I could better combat it and hopefully philosophize on it in a more productive and generative way.